Okay, here we are in chapter 7. We're still in our first week of the course. Again, when you sit down to look at one of these narrated PowerPoints, be sure that you have your textbook out in front of you. Some of these will go through the chapter. Some of them will add additional content to the chapter. Get your notes out and write down some content that you're thinking about, some questions you think about. I'll give you some cues to get you to think about some additional questions. The object of the game here is to just be learning more so that you become an educated person, so that you learn more about marriages and families. We want you to become somebody who's more knowledgeable about marriages and families as a criminal justice professional later on when you finish your larger degree. This chapter is about relationships and selecting mates. These are two questions, kind of sub-questions I've thrown out here. And I've got some additional content to throw out to you, some survey material to throw at you just to kind of get you thinking about this. But maybe you should write down in your notes right now what do you think the answers to these questions are? What do you think makes a successful relationship? Have you already been on some dates in your life? Have you already been around some successful relationships in your life? Maybe your parents, maybe you've got older siblings. Jot down some ideas in your notes here. What do you think makes a successful relationships? And then what are some really good strategies for going about selecting a mate? What's the best way to do that? Is online a really good way to do that these days? Should you be completely honest? What are some things you ought to hold back and not really tell right off the bat? What's the best way to do that? Write down some ideas to yourself here, maybe. Think about that for just a second. Maybe something you could talk about in the discussion board this week. Something I like to introduce to people when we start talking about this is this idea in America that's really kind of very different. In the history of the world, and really in most of the world still today, people find mates and they get connected with people because of practical considerations. They make connections because of economic and political connections. They find a mate who's got a great job. They find a mate who's got a good family. They think about it in real rational kinds of ways. And their families are typically very much involved. And that's really the way it's always been. Well, in America, we don't really do it like that. We certainly after the 20th century, after the Industrial Revolution, we really stopped doing it that way. We really started to base our connections and relationships on falling in love with somebody. And so, I call this the romantic love syndrome. This idea that there's somebody that we have to fall in love with, and there's this perfect person out there to fall in love with. And sometimes this works really well, but oftentimes this leads to lots of unhappiness because you just don't seem to find that perfect person, or they're not living in your neighborhood, or they're so far away. The romantic love syndrome, look, it's this idea that there's one person out there meant for you. One person. That seems kind of drastic, doesn't it? And if there's only one person who can make you really happy, only one person that can make you happy, that's really strict, isn't it? What if there's 100 people that can make you happy? I mean, that's kind of hard. Only one person. That's a lot of pressure on somebody, isn't it? The syndrome also tells us that my emotional fulfillment is only going to happen if I find this right person. In other words, until I find that right person, I'm not going to ever experience this emotional fulfillment. And so oftentimes what people do is they don't feel emotionally fulfilled, and so they discover, well, or they decide you must not be the right person. See all the pressure they put on this person, and they've hinged all this fulfillment, and so as life goes on, and they don't feel fulfilled all the time. What pressure? They decide to, break up with this person or get a divorce or move on to somebody else, or maybe the pretty secretary is the right person for me. Gee, it was the wrong person. Look at the last point. Not because there's something wrong with me, or not because I'm flaky, or not because we need to keep working on our relationship. It needs to continue to evolve. No, because you were the wrong person. See, this doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? It's really hard. The romantic love syndrome is really hard to maintain. So when you're looking at your textbook and looking through the chapter, look at these three concepts here: sexual drive, romantic attraction, and relational attachment. That's going to help you understand this romantic love syndrome that we have here in America today. Those three concepts are going to help you understand why people fall in love, how they stay in love, and how they fall out of love. How it works and how it doesn't work here in America today. Those are three very important concepts and ideas here. So when we're trying to choose a partner, I kind of did a little outline here to kind of help you walk you through the chapter, help you kind of look at, there's a history your chapter walks you through kind of this history of how people went through dating. And I use the word dating, and the word dating is in your chapter. I'm not sure people date anymore. I mean, you're the person who can answer that question. I'm an old guy, and I dated, but I don't know that your generation dates anymore. And certainly the word courtship is not something that people use anymore at all. And maybe your parents didn't even use the word courtship. You might ask them what kind of word they use, and if they even know what courtship means. You might ask them if they even went on dates. It seems to me what's going on is we've kind of reversed the order of things. And now what people do is they engage in casual sex at first to decide if they want to make a relational commitment with somebody. And so because of the sexual revolution, and because women have moved into the world of men in terms of career and in terms of education, and because access to birth control and access to all kinds of technology, that casual sex is much more permissive. It's much more accepted. The stigma is kind of removed from it nowadays. That hooking up is the term that's used. You see that in your textbook, and so that's almost the first step and the first stage that people have before they even go dating or get serious about a relationship. But anyway, look at the terms that we've got here in choosing a partner, choosing a partner, and deciding about a longer-term relationship. Pat dating, serious dating, and maybe getting engaged. Maybe that's way down the road a ways for people. Look through those steps in your chapter, and when you look through them, look at your own history and your own, how have you been socialized in your own set of experiences? How did your parents raise you? What's been going on in your own family with your siblings? What are your beliefs about this? How remember what Durkheim said about fusion, moral fusion. What do you believe about this? And so what do you do? How do people go about meeting potential dates today? It's really hard, isn't it? And so look at the textbook. Sometimes work and school are not good places. Sometimes it's the only place, but sometimes people really don't want to do that because they don't want to date somebody at work and have a relationship that goes bad in 2 weeks, and then you've got to work with the person. So sometimes that's the last place you want to be dating is at work, or having casual sex with people at work. Sometimes friendships turn into relationships, but sometimes that goes bad, and then the friendship falls apart. So these are subtopics in the chapter: friendships, social events, online, even at church sometimes, where you can find someone who's got the same set of moral values that you do. Online is becoming, and I've got some material to show you in a minute, online is becoming more and more and more acceptable as an alternative to people because our lives are so busy and the options available to us aren't there to meet people. Your chapter, and I wanted to point this out to you, has a section in it about because we are dating strangers. Because our dating life is much more casual, and our connections are with people that we don't really know. The opportunity for things to go wrong is dramatically increased, much more so than ever before. And so dating violence, dating rape, those kinds of things are happening at a much higher rate now than ever before. So please pay attention to that part in the chapter. I know you're aware of this and you've got friends who've had these experiences, but please pay attention to that. And certainly because you're probably going into criminal justice careers, this is something that you need to be aware of and pay attention to. Also in the chapter, people don't date. Again, I'm using that word date, and we don't all mean the same thing when we say the word date, but people don't date the same way you do. And so you're a female, and so your male counterpart is defining it differently. You're an African American, and your Hispanic friend is not thinking about it the same way that you are. You're from this neighborhood in Houston, and when you say the word date, your friend from this neighborhood doesn't mean the same thing. And so when we talk about dating, when we talk about connecting with people, there are some subtle differences. And so kind of look at that part of the chapter and kind of skim through that a little bit and look at that. And I think you're going to find some interesting differences that you may or may not know about already. You may have a lot of friends who are different from you, and so you may already know this and you may be aware of this, but you may not. And so I oftentimes have students who they've lived kind of sheltered lives and they don't know a lot of people, and so this is always an interesting part of the chapter to them. And then what I wanted to point out to you is there are two theories here about mate selection. Once you get down the road a ways and you're thinking about finding a mate, well, in the chapter there's the parent image theory and the ideal mate theory. And so I think right now you already have kind of in your head, without maybe even realizing it, some of the ideas of these theories in your head already, and you probably haven't triggered them yet. But when you go and look at one of these two theories in the chapter, I think one or both of them are going to trigger some ideas in your thinking. You're going to go, yeah, that looks real familiar to me, because that's what's already, the parent image theory is already there, and you're already going to think, well, I want somebody like Dad married, or I want someone who's like my mom. And maybe you never said that out loud, but that's what's that's what you've already been kind of programmed to think like. And so, I always tell people that I do premarital counseling sometimes, and I always tell people, I say, well, you need to, when you're dating somebody real seriously and y'all are going to get married, you need to go over to his house and watch the way his mom treats him, because he's going to expect you to treat him the same way his mom is. And so if his mom is picking up his socks off the floor, he's going to expect his wife to pick up his socks off the floor. And so look at these two theories here and see if one of them looks familiar to you. You may not have ever put it into words yet, but take a look at one of these and see if one of them looks familiar to you. I think it might be interesting to you just to kind of look at that. Okay, so I've got some more. This is additional content. This is from the Pew Research Center. Again, if you're going to do a paper somewhere in some other class, Google the Pew Research Center. It has all kinds of great content and data that you can use. This is information about online dating. And it's increasing. The number of people online dating is increasing every year. So 30% of adults are using online dating sites, using an app. They're not necessarily following through with it, but they're experimenting with it. They're looking at it. And they're having, a majority say they have a positive experience with it. Particularly, look at that, particularly younger women are having a good experience with it. But look, what I mean to say here is, look, having a good experience, but now the younger women, when they do it, they are having some negative experience with it. So let me rephrase what I just said. A majority have a positive experience, but there's the big but. So be sure we circle the word but there. Younger women push back and say they have some negative experiences with it because they're getting some harassing messages back from people that they starting to initiate some contact with. And so they have to shut it down. And so there are some negative drawbacks to it, particularly with younger women. And so generally people say, oh, generally overall I'm having a good time. But what's kind of scary with it is that younger women say, I'm getting some younger women are saying I'm getting some bad messaging from people. So look at the chart over here. 3 in 10 have used in the app. 12 have been married or in a committed relationship with someone they met through the online dating app. So 12%, that's a small number, but 12% it worked perfectly for. They found somebody, but that's only 12%. That's not really a big number of people. Only 23% went on with the date. 30% used it. 23% went ahead all the way through and went on the date. 12%, 30% used it. 23% went ahead with the date. 12% got committed with a relationship and got married. So you see how the number declined as it went ahead. Does that make sense? Then there's the big chart. So there's the 30% who started it. 12% got married. There's who divided it by men and women. 32, 28%. There's the ages, so mostly it's younger people doing it, which that makes sense because they're more familiar with the technology. It's pretty divided up by race. It makes more sense that people who are homosexual, LGBT, are using the site because it's harder for people. That's a small number. It's a small percentage of people in the larger population. It's harder for people who are not straight to find somebody. That's a real small percentage of our population, so it's harder to find somebody. So it's easier, more convenient to find somebody online. So that makes perfect sense. People who are college or college plus, they are busier. They are working not just 9 to 5, they are working all the time. And so they don't have time to be out dating. And so they're going to be using an online a tool to date. High school or less are probably not working as much. And if they are working, they're probably working 9 to 5 kinds of jobs. So they have some time to date. So they're not going to be using or needing to use a website as much. Does that make sense? So there's the demographics of what's going on. Does that make sense to you? If you got questions about that, or something doesn't make sense, or what I just said doesn't make sense, please send me an email and let me clarify with you a little bit. Again, when you look at a chart like this, try to write down some facts off of it in a sentence so that it makes more sense to you when you look at charts like this. But again, this is from the Pew. You can go to the Pew Research Center right now and you can look up more details about this online dating and get more details about it if you're interested in this. And then finally, here's another one. Younger women who are having difficulty and having problems, negative interaction. So this is that negative report. So online dating users continue to contact them after saying they were not interested. So 37% reported saying, hey, I'm not interested, and someone kept harassing him, kept giving him content, kept giving him, sending him emails. Sent them a sexual, 35% sent them a sexually explicit message, 28% called them an offensive name, 9% threatened to physically harm them. Gee, that's horrible. Mostly it's women, right? Not men. Mostly it's younger people. Of course, that's who's using it more. Again, look, mostly younger women, women 35 to 49. And so that just breaks it up with the demographics there. So there are some problems with it, and this is going to scare people off. And so the online dating sites need to do something to clean this up, because you've got people who are using the anonymity of this to be creepy and to communicate with people before they can shut them down. It just takes one message, and then I need to shut that guy off, shut this person off. But because it's women experiencing it, it makes you think that it's men sending them the kinds of messages. But that doesn't mean it's only women. There are men who are having the same kinds of negative interactions. But mostly it's 2 to 1 almost. It's women having those experiences. But if you want to know more details about this, again, you can go online to the Pew Center, and I just put on here the demographic chart. There's a write-up about it that gives you more details about it. Anyway, I wanted you to see this information that's not in the chapter, but just wanted you to see what's going on with online dating, because that's a resource that people are using more and more, because it's harder at work to connect with people. People are busy all the time. You're one of the populations of people who are going to be working all the time. You're going to be working at home because you got a laptop, and there's not time to go out and be dating people that you know. You're going to be dating strangers and people you don't know, and it's kind of risky. And so using online so that it screens people for you and puts you into groups of people who have more common interests, it's a resource that people are going to be depending upon more and more in the future. And so learning more about it is what you need to do, because you're an educated person. That's what you want to do. Okay, so this is just to kind of introduce you to Chapter 7 here a little bit. Dig around in it, not just because it's Chapter 7, but because this has got good information for you as a user. You're a user. You're somebody who's going to be dating, forming relationships, trying to figure out what works and doesn't work. And so get into Chapter 7 and see what you can learn about it. If you've got questions, if you something looks confusing or doesn't seem to make sense, please just always send me an email. Let me know what I can do to clarify something or what doesn't seem to make sense. Anyway, have a good week, and I'll talk to you again soon.